This is Andy B on the Get Your Home Show. Now, normally on a Friday, we don't have an interview. However, it's very exciting when we get to do really exciting stuff that we wouldn't ordinarily do. And today we've got a live interview off the back of the performance last week, Friday, Good Friday in Trafalgar Square. Nathan and I went down, took loads of photos, watched a performance of The Passion of Jesus by Wintershall. Last week, if you remember, we spoke to Charlotte and to Ashley. And today, very special, I get to say hello to you, Pete, because you played Jesus in the performance. Hello, Pete.
Hello.
It was an amazing performance. You were just asking me off air what it was like. And I explained to you that my hair was on end. There were points when I was crying. There's a little bit of laughter occasionally, but not exactly silly laughter. It was such an overwhelming, emotional day. I don't even know where to start. Let's just go right to the beginning of this. What got you involved in Wintershall to get you out on a Friday afternoon, Good Friday, all day long, all the rehearsals? Why were you wanting to get involved with Wintershall and this amazing performance?
Well, I grew up in the area, so Wintershall's always been something that I've been aware of. And, I went to see it as a child, the summer show that they do, The Life of Christ, but I'd never actually been up to see the Trafalgar Passion myself until I was in it as the understudy in 2019, back when James Burt Dunsmore was in the lead role. And obviously he was in that role for a long, long time and, did such an amazing job with it that obviously being the understudy, the natural kind of evolution was to take over the main role itself, and that was such an exciting prospect for me. As a young kind of actor straight out drama school, it was sort of my first big gig that I got. Really was doing this show, and it's been such an amazing journey for me. In terms of my personal development, but also my spiritual development, being part of this amazing show.
So drama, that's in the background for you. The Wintershall location, that's in the background for you. And all of a sudden, you're now in the foreground on Trafalgar Square in front of thousands and thousands of people, including people like myself who were just overwhelmed by the performance. And the thing is, the death and resurrection of Jesus, which is obviously basically what the performance was about, it's fairly well known as it goes. And yet I found myself constantly thinking, I did not think about that interaction or that perspective. Like, for example, a photo we took, and it was of you, and in between us and you, we were in the press pen, was a guy with a mobile phone taking a photo of you doing your acting. And somehow that was one of the most emotional moments of the entire performance to me, because the whole point is, in Trafalgar Square, this effectively is what it would have been like. Jesus would have been amongst the crowds. And it just took me from 2026 to 2000 years ago, when Jesus would have been walking amongst people just like you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what this show offers to people is a chance to see these figures recreated in such a kind of tangible way. And often a lot of the work that we do, obviously the figure of Jesus is fleshed out in a myriad ways in the Bible and in theological writing and all of that. But the rest of the characters, if we can call them that, perhaps don't have so much detail. And so a lot of that detail is found in the rehearsal, and finding the sort of hidden lives of the disciples and the women that Jesus surrounded himself with is something that I think brings a real richness to the performance. And getting the audience to be able to interact with those people, and obviously as you see, we get the people up on stage there at the start, and then for the trial of Jesus later on. It's a really powerful thing to have real people sort of so close and so intertwined with us as the actors as well.
I gotta be honest, it was one of the things that I absolutely adored but did not see coming, because I haven't been to this before, was the fact that at various, I think like maybe 4 or 5 different moments, you've got a massive swathe of the crowd involved somehow in the performance. And again, it blew my mind, because I just didn't consider how that interaction could have been, which I think you just did so brilliantly.
Yeah, I think obviously it depends who's sitting at the front, really, in terms of how willing they are to get up. But I think the fact that it's elephant in the room, it's the last year that we're doing it. I mean, people especially excited to get up and get involved this year. So yeah, it's all kind of dependent on the goodwill of those sat at the front. But it was so nice to see how excited everyone got in terms of being how engaged they were with those scenes.
And it really was. It wasn't. I mean, yes, it's down to the people. It's also down to the cast and the day and all the rest of it. But it was phenomenal to see people, whether it was waving the palms or whether it was greeting the character of Jesus as you came back from being dead on the cross into the tomb, and then you walk back into the crowd, and yet people were, I don't know, it was like lightning. It was, I can't put it another way. People were just immediately, wholeheartedly, fully engaged in everything that was going on.
Yeah, and it's, one of the things that always strikes me, I think, when people get up and, we have the Pharisees going among the crowds, sort of trying to encourage them to shout, crucify him. And, when Pilate says, should I kill him or set him free, kind of thing, I always assumed that people would be more willing to shout, "Oh, free him! We want Jesus freed, not Barabbas." And yet, actually, they're pretty keen to jump on the crucifying bandwagon. I suppose they're just being good sports, taking part, taking their role as crowd member quite seriously. But it's an interesting thing to me. I think how easily people go along with what it is that they're being asked to shout.
Very much so. Now, you've mentioned a few things which I think we need to sort of dig into a bit further. One of them for me is that you're performing as Jesus in The Passion of Jesus. Is a Wintershall play. It's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
We've seen how you've now got involved in that. But why did you want to be involved in it? Because I'm guessing you've got a job as well. So you've got to sacrifice something of what you would ordinarily do. What is it that you're normally doing that you've had to sacrifice in order to do playing the role of Jesus?
So in my day job, I'm an English teacher down at a school in Arundel. And so what I'm sacrificing effectively are my weekends. So I'm working full-time as a teacher, and then our rehearsal period is every Saturday and Sunday from February through to June. And obviously it's through to June because we have the Life of Christ coming up in the summer. And the school I work in now and schools that I worked in previously have been very generous in allowing me to take a week off of teaching to go and be in these productions, because obviously the Life of Christ takes place during the term time because a lot of the audience who come and watch that show are school children. So, it's obviously by that point, my exam classes are all kind of well into the thick of their exams. So there's, no one's being negatively impacted, I suppose, by my absence. Well, hopefully, but I rely on the generosity of my colleagues and of the students to enable me to do this wonderful thing. Because obviously, while it's a very important piece, and while it's something that I think has a great deal of significance, not only to the people who watch it, but also to the people that take part in it, it's also a lot of fun. I get a lot of joy out of working with the Wintershall cast, especially considering most of them, or many of them, have been in it since the beginning, since the late 90s, early 2000s, and so it's very much like being part of a big family, I suppose, in that way.
You said that it's developed a bit about who you are because you came out of drama college, and this has been part of that journey. You also talked about how it's been part of your spiritual journey. What were you meaning by that?
Well, I think in terms of my my faith journey, as it were, obviously, I was raised Catholic, and faith has always been an important part of my life. But I think, as people often do, we sort of go in and out of our kind of faith journeys at times, don't we? And I think, in particular, my time at university and drama school was a time where perhaps that wasn't the most important thing in my life, and actually playing the role of Jesus has brought me back to that, because in the sense that I approached it first as a character study, in the way that you do when you're preparing for any role, is you look at the available sources of information on that character, and there's a lot of information out there on Jesus, and actually reading about that brought new life to my faith. And I think it was the move from it being, the faith that I'd inherited from my parents, the faith that I didn't perhaps understand quite as well as I could have done, to being my own interpretation of it, or my own kind of knowledge of who the person of Jesus is. And so, when you play a character, you get to know them, and you get to know what makes them tick. And actually encountering that led me back to the church and led me back to my faith.
I chatted to some of the cast members on Friday, and it was interesting talking to them, and faith kept on coming up in very, very different ways. For some of them, I think it was the guy that played the narrator, whose name I forget, please forgive me.
Buzz.
Go on.
His name's Buzz.
Thank you. That was the one. Yeah. But I think he was saying that, I'm not overly religious, but this is important to me because this is a part of who I am. And there were other folk we spoke to who said that in different ways of how getting to do this in front of other people was important. Because here's the thing. People listening or watching probably didn't notice, but you were barefoot, and an awful lot of the cast were. We're not talking about a nice heated floor. This is, stone slabs on the floor. I picked up a safety pin that was rusty when I was chatting to one of the cast. I just thought, no, that's not going to stay there. But this was a very committed performance.
Yeah, I think, the barefoot angle, I often get questions about that. And I think, well, it's partially a historical accuracy thing and partially a actor thing. I think actors have all sorts of different processes for getting into a role. And for me, one of them is literally putting myself in the character's shoes. And so I'll try and work out what shoes I'm wearing for a performance in order to kind of get into that character's mindset. And then thinking about Jesus, my options were sandals or bare feet. And I think considering how much running around we do, and we didn't do it this year, but in the past we've had sort of more physical theatre elements where I'm climbing over the disciples and that sort of thing, and just the practicalities of it meant that it was easier to go about in bare feet. And well, it's not as cold as you might think, but it's nice to see that's spread to a number of the other members of the cast as well.
It was. I interviewed quite a few, and there were bare feet among them. All people who were about to go barefoot were just wearing it as they were preparing for it. So the Passion of Jesus, this was the last year at Wintershall. We chatted to Charlotte last week, who shared a lot of the reasons why that is the case. But of course, it carries on at Wintershall, the home of where this play began. Have you got continuing involvement now in what Wintershall are also continuing to do?
Well, insofar as I take part in the life of Christ, yes. I'm not involved in the education side of things, which forms a large part of their work, and seeing how the education aspect of the Wintershall charity has developed over the last few years has been a real joy, because we've actually had some experience of it ourselves as the cast, because Lucy, who runs does a lot of work with the education aspect of things, led us through a kind of breakdown of a Passover meal and sort of the symbolism of each of the elements of it, and why that has an impact on the Last Supper. And so, things like the morsel being dipped in the dish being actually not just, if you don't know what that means, it kind of doesn't have as much significance unless you know how important that was to the meal and to those followers of Jesus, and sort of how they would have interpreted that. So, yeah, we got to kind of benefit from the education aspect of it. So, yeah, there's the education part, there's the life of Christ, as I said, which is, such a treat. I think because we have a lot of school children coming to see it, we get, I'll get sort of little cards or notes that they'll write for me. I've got them all kept in an envelope at home, including, one that a child did manage to do a drawing of me during the performance, and actually, quite a beautiful drawing, which I'll treasure, for the rest of my life, really. And so, while obviously the Passion in Trafalgar is a really powerful spectacle where you get, huge crowds coming to see it, there's something to be said for the life of Christ and the impact that has on the thousands of school children that come to see that as well.
just take us through some of last Friday then, because obviously this was special for a number of reasons. It's the 15th performance at Trafalgar Square alone. We've had revealed that that's probably going to be the last time that's going to happen. But take us through your day on Friday, because I know, having chatted to Charlotte and Ashley, it's a very early start for the cast. They have to go very early, get to Wintershall, get on coaches, come into Trafalgar Square. But where did your day really begin for you on the Good Friday?
Well, I'm, one of those unlucky few getting the coach up with the others from Wintershall. So we get the coach about 6:30 in the morning. I did, toy with the idea of maybe getting myself a hotel up in London for the night before the last one. But actually, it's all part of the fun, is coming up on the coach with everyone. So, so we get the coach up about 6:30. We're in the square for about 8:30. And obviously that's the first time that we are all together as this cast in that space. So, we need to walk the space, and, we rehearse in a barn down in Wintershall. So we need to get used to the size of things, where the scenes are taking place, etc. Because, while there are some old hands in the company, there are also some people who, this is their first time taking part in the play. So, showing them where all the kind of exits and entrances are that we've been talking about in rehearsal. So that all takes place in the first sort of hour or so. We'll go over notes, go over, the more technical scenes, like the fight scene in Gethsemane, that sort of thing. And then while the cast prepares, I'm off to makeup, because all of the makeup for the crucifixion and the flogging, that's all done beforehand. So I've got that on under my robes for the whole performance, because obviously there's only a few seconds where I'm taken off, and thankfully not actually flogged. It's just sort of top up some of that makeup and then bring me back out on stage. So yeah, it's quite a long day. It's quite a tiring day. Doing the two shows back to back, somewhat takes it out of you, but it's all good fun.
So when did you actually get to go to bed? Was it Friday, Saturday morning? How long a day was it for you?
Well, I think I was probably home maybe about 8:00. So once we sort of tidied everything up, and I'd gone out for dinner with some friends afterwards, and then made it home. It was 8:00, and then pretty much straight to bed. So, and then thankfully I've had some time to recover this week before I go back to work next week.
And then one thing which it baffles me, this is nothing to do with necessarily last week, but how on earth do you remember the lines? Because I can't remember names. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. I can remember car registrations, oddly, but how on earth do you remember all of those lines that you need to be able to get out? Because I guess some of them, maybe you can change it a bit, but there are other ones where you've really got to hit it, because I'm guessing somebody else is waiting for you to say something that triggers the next scene or the next action.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. Firstly, obviously, this is my 4th year of doing the show, so there are some bits that sort of come back to you once you start rehearsing again. There's a degree to which, while there are obviously certain lines that are scripturally based, and certain lines that, like you say, are used as cues for others, there is a little bit of wiggle room with what we're saying. And I think there are certain times where perhaps I'm not saying exactly the same thing for each show, but it's something that as a cast we're all quite used to. So people do really well to just keep the ball rolling, even if they're not quite sure, even if I've said something that's not exactly what they were expecting.
Okay, there's two really obvious questions. One, what was the hardest part for you in terms of the performance on Good Friday last week? What was the most difficult, challenging element for you?
I think there's a couple of moments. I think, the crucifixion is hard. It is hard putting yourself in that kind of situation and actually trying to focus on giving a good performance of someone who is dying on a cross, actually experiencing what they are experiencing without kind of I don't know, I suppose without overdoing it and without causing myself actual injury, and still remembering to deliver the lines and still remembering to to do what I'm supposed to be doing, but also I think seeing the responses that people have to me on the cross. Like, I've worked with these guys for a number of years now, and I know there's one cast member in particular, Trish, who says, "Oh, every time I see you up there, it just makes me cry." And I love Trish, and I love working with all of those guys, and actually seeing their faces watching me on the cross can be quite harrowing, really. So that's one of the moments, I think. And then the other is the resurrection itself. And I think that's almost for the opposite reason, which is that rather than being filled with sadness and pain, as you often are in the crucifixion scene, it's being filled with joy and actually almost trying to hold it together towards the end of the show, especially this year, knowing it was our last one for a while. Holding that joy in and making sure that I was focused on the message. So yeah, no, it's tough to describe them as being hard, because obviously it's always a pleasure to be in the production and to do that role. But those are the scenes I'd say have the biggest challenge to them, I suppose.
And then the other really, really obvious question is, what was your favourite moment about the Good Friday performance of The Passion of Jesus in Trafalgar Square last week?
I think one of my favourite moments for sure, and it's always a joy to do, really, is there's a bit in the resurrection scene where I've come and revealed myself to Mary Magdalene, and then I have to go and hide in the audience. And in one of the performances, there was this little lad sat at the front with his dad who, was calling Jesus, Jesus when I was coming down. And so I went, that's who I've got to go to next to. So I went and sat down next to him, and, he was gasping and speaking to his dad. And, it's almost, it's a real privilege, really, to see the impact that even just a guy dressed up as Jesus can have on people in the audience. And, especially sort of seeing the response to it on social media, obviously it's always going to be a bit of a mixed bag, but generally speaking, the feedback's been great, and thinking about how touched people are, really, like you say, it's one of those productions where people are really powerfully moved by what we have to show them.
And it is a really, really powerful story, which is why it was so important to have this story. I love how Charlotte talked of her dad creating this.
Oh, sorry, I broke up a bit there, Andy. Say again.
Yeah, it was just really phenomenal to watch. The whole thing was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and we do owe it all to Charlotte and Charlotte's dad in particular. The vision that he had for this production, was phenomenal, and for him to have written such a powerful account of Jesus's story that kind of draws, it's not focused on one gospel in particular. There's, there are elements of all of the gospels being drawn together in a way that is able to turn something that is obviously a very powerful text, or very powerful series of texts in their own right, into a coherent narrative that really hits the highs and lows of Jesus' story. Is such a powerful testament to Peter and what he's been able to give to us as a cast and give to the audience who came to see it.
Pete, thank you for your time. I know you're traveling at the moment. You're taking some time out to chat to us, which I'm really grateful for. I want to say thank you to you and the whole cast, really, because it was a phenomenal day. I look back, I still cry as I think about certain things, or we went through the photos. I think we got like 800 photos or something through the day. And going through those, again, it's just triggering sort of emotional responses, because it's not just a powerful story. This is the story of all stories. And it's just so beautifully illustrated, so well delivered across the board from dozens of people that we got to see. You kind of know that there's all other people who you don't get to see, who are doing something, but you don't get to see. But the whole thing, utterly beautiful. So from me personally, thank you. It was an amazing day, and we're just so privileged to have been there.
Oh, thank you for coming down, and thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Pete. We're going to move on to some more music now.
Here at Pure 247 Radio, we've had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with some amazing stories.
I was about 5k off the coast paddling, and I was watching this storm on the land, and it literally hit a mountain, and rather than just going over the top of it, just turned and just came straight at me. You can't stay on the board in that instance, so I literally am jumping off the back of the board. I've got everything tethered down on the board, and I'm just holding on to the back of the board.
As I walked in, there was a fight going on the floor. There was a police sergeant sailing over the desk to help with restraining somebody. And the doors were clanging shut, all the big metal gates, and there were alarms going off and radios. And I felt this most enormous peace come over me, because I realised that this is where God wanted me to spend my career behind bars.
It was like a baptism of fire, and it was like the most socially deprived council wards in Britain. And then we were going into schools, and then kids were coming to the gigs, but then knocking on my door at night, and I was out there playing football till 11:30 p.m. at night, 12 o'clock, feeding kids, running youth clubs.
If you've missed an inspiring conversation and want to catch up, or you'd like to revisit a brilliant interview, you can. Our interviews are available on YouTube and podcast, so you can always catch up anytime you like. Search for Pure 247 Radio wherever you get your podcasts, or find our YouTube channel at Pure 247 Radio, or head over to www.pure247radio.org/catch up.